This is a podcast by the Business Times.
Welcome to Money Hacks, a podcast series by the Business Times where we explore useful financial tips. I'm your host, Chris Lim. Today, we'll be talking about managing your wealth and planning your legacy. This episode is brought to you by Opus by Prudential, which is Prudential's unique approach to wealth management and legacy planning for high net worth individuals. Our guest today is Angeline Alexander, Head of High Net Worth and Affluent Segments at Prudential Singapore. Welcome to the show, Angeline.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
So, in a nutshell, what is Opus by Prudential? What do you do for customers and how do you become a member?
Well, we started Opus by Prudential about 2 years ago because we saw a gap in the market. And so it's our dedicated high net worth proposition. Primarily, it's advisory-led and service-led because from our research, we found that these are what customers place high importance on. And it's really to drive how we can better address their wealth management and legacy planning needs.
Okay, is it invitation only?
No, it's not by invitation only. Essentially, if you are a Prudential customer that meets our minimum criteria for the Opus by Prudential proposition, you're automatically in the community.
Oh, cool. Okay, so Opus by Prudential, let's say you're in the community and you're thinking about managing your wealth. What exactly is wealth management? After all, most of us already have bank accounts and many of us have some sort of investment and insurance portfolio, even if we don't think of it as a portfolio. So how do we go about approaching wealth management?
That's a very good question, Chris. I think when most of us think about wealth management, we tend to think about those solutions that you talked about just now, primarily around investments, because when people think about wealth management, they're thinking about growing their wealth. Well, what we like to encourage our high net worth individuals to look at it from a broader perspective. So not just about growing wealth, but also about wealth preservation and wealth transfer as well. So you might know this, but there are about 190,000 millionaires in Singapore. And research does show that only 1 in 5 wealthy families actually has a wealth transfer plan for their assets. So you might find that surprising, but that's actually what the stats show right now. So Singapore is a young country and therefore the wealth accumulation is quite recent. So we really try and encourage our high net worth customers to start to look at wealth management in a holistic approach, incorporating insurance solutions as part of their portfolio as well.
Okay, so it's more than just accumulating your wealth and holding on to your wealth. There are a whole bunch of other things to consider, including how to transfer it to the next generation or to the rest of your family.
Yeah, that's right. So depending on what their assets portfolio looks like, but a high net worth customer could have a range of assets in their portfolio, right? Whether it's business, whether it's real estate, or even cash assets, and obviously investment assets. So depending on what that looks like, we do try and encourage them to start to look at it, not just for the now, but also start to look at what their financial goals are in terms of succession planning. And also, in the unfortunate time where they do pass on, what is that plan for these assets?
Okay, so walk us through this step by step. I mean, how would our listeners, especially high net worth listeners, approach managing their wealth? Is there a prep stage, where they audit themselves and get stuff ready, followed by an execution phase? Step by step, walk us through.
Well, as with everything, right, Chris, planning is really important. So even with high net worth individuals, we reinforce the importance of having a clear view of what their financial goals are. What do they want to achieve? And whether that's in the short term, the medium term, or the long term. Now, with this segment of customers, they have a lot of resources available for them, whether it's through their lawyers or through their accountants, and also through their insurance consultants and through their banks. So they do have a range of support resources to help them actually develop a plan for them to achieve these goals. So the first thing is definitely about planning so that whatever solution that's mapped out for them is personalized and crafted for what they need. Secondly, and I've mentioned this before, it's to really take a holistic approach and start to look at solutions not just through the investment instruments, but also through insurance solutions as well. Because insurance solutions do play a significant role in helping customers protect their assets against, whether it's personal, financial, or business risks. And as mentioned, it's about that whole wealth transfer coverage as well. And finally, as with all goals, to regularly review them. We are living longer in Singapore, and therefore, with living longer brings about changing needs, and therefore financial goals will also change with time. So we encourage our customers to regularly review these goals as well.
If you like Money Hacks so far, please subscribe to Money Hacks on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, and like us and give us a rating. And now back to our conversation about wealth management and legacy planning with Angeline Alexander, Head of High Net Worth and Affluent Segments at Prudential Singapore. This episode is brought to you by Opus by Prudential. Now, Angeline, before the break, we were talking about the steps our listeners should take to approach managing their wealth, and it sounded like there are pretty much 3 steps. First step is the early part of planning, which is auditing your assets. And then I guess the second half of the early planning, which is making sure that you have a holistic plan so that you don't pigeon yourself into only looking at one aspect of your planning and neglecting other bits. And of course, the third step is constantly reviewing your plan because your needs change, your wealth accumulation, your assets may change, your stage of life may change. So you need to keep reviewing those steps. Of course, the next bit we're talking about is legacy planning. What exactly is legacy planning?
Well, simply put, legacy planning is really around transferring your wealth and your assets to someone else or to your heir, so it's as simple as that. So depending on, again, the asset portfolio, this plan could be very simple or it could be very complex. But what we're also seeing increasingly as part of legacy planning, that high net worth customers are also starting to include philanthropy as part of their legacy plan. And it's this genuine intention of giving back to the community. So they're starting to incorporate elements of philanthropy into their legacy planning as well. Now, because it is a complex plan in that sense, because depending on the number of heirs someone has, it could require, obviously, comprehensive advice. So what we do for our Opus clients is that we provide specialist expertise through our value-added services panel. So we bring in experts who are specializing in trust, tax, and business advisory. So firms such as Raja & Tan and Deloitte, Singapore, we bring them in to value add in terms of the legacy planning conversations.
But isn't it, to oversimplify, isn't it about just writing a will? No? Is it more than that?
Well, it is about writing a will, but it's also about, again, it depends on what the individual wants to achieve from their will or from their legacy plan, because they might want to have an intention of being fair to everyone. So if they have 3 children, they want it to be, an equitable distribution of assets across all 3 children. But the complexity arises when, for example, they might have a business which maybe one of the children is running and they've got real estate assets and maybe cash and investment assets. So how do you create that equity, right? Where the business is valued a bit differently from real estate and so on. How do you get that equity across the distribution of your wealth when the time comes for that wealth to be transferred on to the next generation? So it's elements like these that take time and obviously require the high net worth individual to really start to think and plan how they want their legacy to be remembered, but also to be distributed across the family.
All right, Angeline. Then could you walk us through then, step by step? How would our listeners go about planning their legacy?
Well, Chris, it's 3 things: plan early, insure, and give back. So with Plan Early, we encourage our customers to plan sooner rather than later because the better prepared they are right now, it will help them cope with risks that might come in the future. The other piece as well is it will allow them to focus on what they have to do today so that they can protect for their tomorrow. And so challenges like issues around succession planning will then be planned and catered for a smooth transition. The next point is around insuring their assets. So insurance solutions create that liquidity, and that allows a family to avoid having to sell assets at the wrong time. So a substantial death benefit through insurance also enlarges the estate, which increases the total value distributed among the heirs. So that allows the high net worth individual to create that equitable distribution amongst his family members. Finally, give back. Philanthropy is increasingly important for high net worth customers these days, and it provides an avenue to accommodate the next generation who may not want to be actively involved in the family business, but wish to contribute to the family's legacy. So we encourage our high net worth customers to start to plan for philanthropy into their legacy plan if that's what they wish. And in this respect, insurance can also be an instrument to help actualize this goal for them.
Thank you for sharing your expertise with us, Angeline.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
We've been speaking about wealth management and legacy planning with Angeline Alexander, Head of High Net Worth and Affluent Segments at Prudential Singapore. This episode is brought to you by Opus by Prudential, which is Prudential's unique approach to wealth management and legacy planning for high net worth individuals. That's a wrap for this episode of Money Hacks, a podcast series by the Business Times.
That was an SPH podcast by the Business Times. Find us on Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts, or streaming on Google Home. Do feedback to us at podcast@sph.com.sg. You can also check out more podcasts on various topics at the Straits Times, the Business Times and Money FM 89.3. Any financial or investment information in this podcast is for use in Singapore only and is intended to be for your general information. Any particular investment or decision should only be made after consulting with a fully qualified financial advisor.